Look, I know this episode has been dubbed as Season of Bolt Charge and Strand, but here's the thing. I don't care. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Okay, but actually, there's two reasons why I want to talk about this build today. First, the last time I brought up a similar build to this one, the exotic armor piece was still bugged. The other reason is, while most of the artifact is related to Arc and Strand, there are still some that relate to other builds, and it includes this one. To give you the short description of this build, your job is to crowd control and freeze everything into oblivion with borderline infinite knives and heavy ammo, while gaining giant chunks of super energy along the way. And once your super is full, instead of using it, you go to your local pawn shop and trade it in for a big girthy laser beam of ice. The build's two exotic components are going to be Agar Scepter, playing the role of throbbing ice beam, and Mask of Fealty as our infinite shuriken slot machine. Before talking about the rest of the build and the gameplay loop, let's look at the artifact for a second first. I'll throw up the whole artifact on screen somewhere so you guys can copy it one for one if you'd like, but for the main ones I want to talk about, they are the following. First, we have Overload Machine Gun and Overload Trace Rifle. These allow us to, well, stun Overload champions, but also to apply exhaust to anything that we shoot. And that's important because exhaust is basically universal woven mail, where it gives you increased damage resistance against a target. With that, we're also using Disruptor Spike, which just improves the effect of Exhaust and Sever. We're not using Sever with this build, but we are using Exhaust. Next is Beam Medic to heal you when you're using your Trace Rifle, in this case Agars, and then Harsh Refractions, which gives you a damage boost to Trace Rifles when matching the same element type. In this case, we're using Agars, which is Stasis, and then our Stasis Super, Revenant. Although technically we won't actually be using our Super, but you get the point. Now for the two artifact mods that I really like for this build. They are the following. Elemental Siphon, which states that rapidly defeating combatants with either a kinetic weapon or a weapon matching your super type, again, Stasis, you will then create elemental pickups that match your super. And then with a boost on, elemental pickups become super energy, or in more simple terms, they get converted into super energy. Then we have elemental supercharger, which says defeating exhausted targets with weapons that match your super type gives you super energy. So anything that we shoot with a trace rifle or a machine gun is exhausted and thus gives us bonus super energy. I do want to make a note of Agars in this spot here because it seems like it's inconsistent, or at least that's what some people are reporting, where it sometimes does overload stun and sometimes it doesn't, so be wary of that too. The next two mods are, let's insert Bolt Charge into any build because it's really dumb. We have Defibrillating Blast, which allows us to instantly get Bolt Charge ready when we stun any champion, and also heals us when we stun any champion or proc Bolt Charge. And then, of course, Flashover to increase the damage of Bolt Charge and the Lightning Bolts, as well as giving us Amplified, which in turn will give us 15% bonus damage resist against all enemies. And then the last slot for your artifact is going to be either Gold from Lead, which allows you to try to get a chance at heavy ammo anytime you pick up special ammo, or Dreadful Finisher, which just gives you special ammo anytime you finisher a enemy that's above a red bar. It comes down to preference and what activity you're doing. For example, if I'm doing the Heist Moon Battleground GM, not the Sabbath Moon one, the other one, and I know there's going to be heavy ammo crates throughout that Nightfall, then there's no point in me wearing Gold from Lead because I'm going to have plenty of heavy ammo, so instead I would wear Dreadful Finisher. And with that, let's jump into the Revenant Kit. First, we have our aspects. Number one is going to be Grim Harvest. This states defeating slowed or frozen targets creates stasis shards. These shards grant melee energy when they're picked up by you or your allies. Additionally, when you have Grim Harvest equipped, picking up stasis shards grants stacks of frost armor. So this is doing multiple things. First, it's giving us our melee energy back when we even use a single melee, but also when we pick up these shards, it's giving us damage resist from frost armor. Our second aspect is going to be Touch of Winter, specifically what it does to our Cold Snap Grenade. Spoiler alert, we're using Cold Snap Grenade. So it states, Seekers duplicate after freezing a target and create a stasis crystal on detonation. So it's going to freeze up a bunch of enemies and prime them to get shattered by a single shuriken if we want to. It also will then detonate a crystal, which then gives us more shards. More shards gives us melee energy, and you kind of see the loop here. And for our fragments, we have 5 of them going from left to right. First, we have Whisper of Chains. Defeating targets while you have Frost Armor has a chance to create a Stasis Shard. So basically, anytime you do anything with your build ability-wise, you will create Stasis Shards, then that will give you Frost Armor, then the next thing you do has a chance to give you more shards, which will then in turn give you more Frost Armor stacks, and then give you more melee energy back as well. Our second fragment is going to be Whisper of Conduction. Nearby Stasis Shards track to your position. So basically, you want to have a little bit of distance between you and your enemies when you're throwing your melees, So this way, when you do that, and they all shatter and die, and there's a bunch of crystals everywhere, they track to you instead of you chasing them down. Our third fragment is Whisper of Shards. Shattering a stasis crystal temporarily boosts your grenade recharge rate. So, think of it this way. You use your grenade, you freeze a bunch of stuff, you make crystals, you make shards, etc. Use your melee, you shatter everything, you pick up all those crystals, you get a bunch of energy back, and while you're doing that, you're also increasing your grenade recharge rate, and then through that, you're getting your cold snap back very, very fast, as you'll see in the gameplay footage, and then you just repeat the process over and over. Then in our fourth slot, we have Whisper of Hunger, which allows us to increase the melee energy gained from when we pick up stasis shards. This is basically a key to having near unlimited shurikens to throw at your enemies, so I would definitely keep this on 100%. And lastly, in our fifth slot, we have Whisper of Fissures, which increases the damage and the size of the burst when we shatter either frozen enemies or stasis crystals. And with that, so far, we have increased grenade recharge rate, increased melee recharge rate, increased damage from stasis crystals and shattering enemies, and increased super recharge rate from our artifact. Then we get to the fun part of the build. Well, that's not fair. Throwing your shurikens everywhere nonstop is pretty fun. But my favorite part of the build is when we just turn on Aggers and destroy everything in sight. The great part about this is you can use your machine gun and your shurikens to take out any red bar enemy that you like. But when the tough guys show up, you know, the yellow bars, the champions, the Lucid Hive, etc., then you can just use Aggers with the Catalyst mode and then rip them apart. For those of you that don't know, when you have a full super, you can hold your reload button to start draining your super in exchange to overflow the magazine of Aggers and empower the beam with bonus damage. On top of that, Aggers will also then start freezing enemies and shattering them since you're damaging them continuously, which will also turn into bonus damage, both through Aggers doing it over and over and also with Whisper of Fissures. This also works very well on bosses that are stationary for the most part. In fact, sometimes you can be shooting a boss with Aggers in Catalyst mode and be gaining more super energy than you're losing, which is always funny to see. Now let's talk about the gameplay loop. You have one of two ideal situations here. So the first is going to be just utilizing your abilities. Use your Cold Snap, your melees, your dodge to get another melee, rinse, repeat the process, right? Your other option is going to be utilizing your machine gun. In this particular case, it has to be a stasis machine gun. You could either use Reoccurrent Impact, or if you don't have that, you can use Quilm's Terminus from Kingsfall, if you happen to have that crafted. The main idea here is to not use too much of Aggers' ammo, since you want to keep most of it for when it's in its Catalyst mode, so you can utilize your machine gun to stack kills and then make the Elemental Supercharger proc, thus giving you bonus super energy. And remember, you're also activating Elemental Siphon, which will then turn your stasis shards into bonus super energy too. But don't worry, that's not the only way you can generate super energy. You'll also have other methods like having heavy-handed in your gloves, so that every time you throw your Withering Blade, yeah, I know what it's called, I just say shuriken, anytime you throw your Withering Blade, you will get an orb on every kill, because we'll have 3 copies of heavy-handed. Then you also have Siphon mods, of course, in your helmet, so in this case it will be Stasis Siphon anytime you get kills with either your machine gun or with Aggers. And you just keep repeating this loop until you get super energy to the max. Then once it's maxed, you activate Aggers Catalyst mode, go to town on whatever enemies you want. Once it's off, go back to basics. And now let's cut to armor mods. So I will have a dim link down below in the description with all these mods in case you want to try the build out on your own. But here I'll briefly go over them to give you an idea of why I'm running them. Also, while you're in the description, you might as well check out the socials, they're free. Let's start with the helmet. First, we have 1 copy of Dynamo to reduce our super cooldown, as well as giving us a chunk of super energy anytime we dodge near an enemy, which would be all the time. Then we have 1 copy of Hands On to give us bonus super energy anytime we get a melee kill. Again, happens all the time. And then 1 Siphon mod that I mentioned earlier for Stasis. For gloves, I have 3 copies of Heavy Handed that I alluded to earlier. In my chest, I have 1 copy of 2 resist mods, Void and Arc in this case. You can switch this to whatever you want, depending on the activity. And then 1 copy of Stasis Reserves, because I want to increase the reserves of Aggers. In my boots, I have 1 copy of Insulation to reduce the cooldown on my class ability, just so I get my dodge back a little faster, and in turn get another melee charge faster. Then I have 1 copy of Recuperation. Anytime I pick up an orb, I heal myself. That's always helpful. And then 1 copy of Stasis Weapon Surge to buff the damage of Aggers when I go crazy with the Catalyst. And lastly, in my class item, 1 copy of Outreach to reduce my melee cooldown. That's the whole point of the build, melees. Then 1 copy of Distribution to reduce all ability cooldowns, which includes your super. And lastly, Powerful Attraction for when I dodge, I pick up all the orbs around me, which in turn gets me to my super faster. And it also activates Insulation, Recuperation, etc. Anyway, that's the build. I really enjoy using this, even though it's not a full-on Stasis episode, and Hunters kind of, you know, got shafted this episode anyway, so I wanted to have some positive lighting on this, so I think people will enjoy running this. But you guys let me know what you think of the build. In the meantime, if you did enjoy the video, please consider subscribing today. It does help the channel grow and is much appreciated. If you want to go the extra mile, you can leave a like and or comment below as well. If you don't know what to comment, you could leave Shuriken as the comment, just to get that one guy mad that I didn't say Withering Blade the entire video. Alright, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Goodbye.